Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. More folks are coming in, but I want to be conscientious of everyone's time. So, Megan, if you want to start the slides, that would be great. So good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Randazzo, and I'm the president of the Research Foundation, and we're certainly excited that all of you are with us today. We understand that your time is limited, and we appreciate you spending just a little bit of time with us this afternoon virtually to learn more about our community grants information meeting, which this is year 4. So I'm going to start a little bit, talk a little bit about our agenda. We want to focus today on information about the grants program. I'm going to talk a little bit about our focus areas, our eligibility, our award details, and then spend some time also on the online application and make sure that there's enough time at the end for any specific questions that you might put in the chat throughout the presentation. We're going to start with just a little bit of a brief background on the Research Foundation and then transition into the Community Grants Program. So let me talk a little bit next about who is the Research Foundation. And so we think understanding a little bit more about our organization and our foundation allows you to understand why and how we've come up with these focus areas. And certainly these are, we've stayed within our same focus area the last couple of years. And our organization, like many of your organizations, will be doing strategic planning to kind of assess our community grants program and the impact we've made in the first 3 years. And so we'll move to this next slide that's up and talk a little bit about that history. So our foundation's story began in 1965 when we were formed to support Research Hospital. We were initially organized as the Research Hospital Foundation, and we served in that role for almost 40 years, raising funds to support Research Hospital, located, of course, in urban Kansas City. And when HCA, the for-profit corporation, purchased Research Medical Center at that time, we separated. We were already a 501c3, but we became an independent 501c3 with no ownership above our organization. It's a self-perpetuating nonprofit. At the time of our separation, our unrestricted funds were invested. We continued to do fundraising. We've continued to do fundraising since we separated in 2003 for our many foundation programs that we still operate post separation. But in 2023, we launched the new Community Grants Program. And in that first year, 31 nonprofit organizations received a little over $1 million in support. 2024 was our second year. And that year we increased to almost 1.2 million to 32 agencies. And then last year, year 3, we awarded the full amount that the board had allocated, which was $1,775,000. And that was designated to 44 local organization. So in our first 3 years, we're excited as an organization that we've invested a little over $4 million in the Kansas City community to support many health related programs. Our next slide, I want to visit a little bit just about our vision and mission. Certainly, I think like many of you on this call, we are working, partnering for a healthy community. And we are currently investing in health-centered programs and partnerships that benefit healthcare students and healthcare professionals, patients, and people in the Kansas City community. So I'm just going to briefly talk about those programs, and then we'll move on to the grant informational meeting that you're all here for. So we have four key areas that we are currently focusing on, and want to really talk a little bit about these programs so that you understand why these specific areas that we're already supporting aren't areas that we're supporting through our community grants program. But we work with lots of colleges and universities where we invest in healthcare student scholarships. The RN vacancy rate in the greater Kansas City area hovers around 14%. And so our organization has heavily invested in nursing student scholarships as well as other healthcare scholarships. We have invested nearly 750,000 for 2026 for these students that are working to get degrees in whether or not it's nursing, radiology, nuclear medicine, radiation therapy. We also do some support for DPT and radiation therapy and what am I missing? Laboratory science. We also heavily invest in healthcare professionals. We partner with William Jewell Research College of Nursing and Avila for their faculty working on their doctoral degrees, as well as awards and stipends for the work they do with nursing students. We host full-day medical symposiums for area healthcare professionals in need of CME or CE credits, and focus on that because these are the individuals that during their lifetime support lots of different patients throughout our community, and bringing the latest advancements in education to that group of healthcare providers is important in the care of patients. And then we also have a variety of programs for underserved patients. And then we have an award-winning injury prevention program that's been around since 1987 called Think First, that reaches approximately 13 to 15,000 students annually in the area of injury prevention. So that's just a brief recap of our programs. Want to move into our community grants program. And of course, if you do have specific questions, put those in the chat. I want to introduce Kate Heinen. She is our Director of Community Grants. Kate joined us in January of 2023, so right in time to do those first year interim site visits and reports. If you've received a grant from the Research Foundation, most likely Kate has done your site visit with other board members and team members. And so she's going to go over our focus areas, our eligibility, and then, of course, the process to apply for grants. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I always like hearing Cynthia's introduction because I do think it is important that that there's some context offered for what the Research Foundation does and all the programs that the Research Foundation provides, that the Community Grants Program is just one of those programs. Because if that's your only interaction with us, then you might be at risk of thinking that that's all the foundation does is give out grants. And really, there's a lot of other programs that take place. So thank you so much. We'll go right into talking about the eligibility for year 4, which has not changed very much, as you'll see if you've attended a previous info session. This is going to look pretty familiar. So the main piece is that applicants must be a nonprofit organization, not pending 501c3 status, need to have 501c3 status with net assets below 150 million. And organizations who have net assets above 50 million, but below 150 million will be prompted in the application to explain their financial need. But organizations that have net assets above 150 million are ineligible to apply. And then organizations must primarily serve Jackson County, Missouri, or at least the programs that for which they're applying for funds need to primarily serve Jackson County, Missouri, with a focus preferred on urban Kansas City. And when we say primarily, we mean more than 50% of your service numbers would be residents of Jackson County, Missouri. And then the last piece is focus area alignment, which we're going to go over a couple of the focus areas, and that can be for your organization or for your program. So whichever you're applying for funds. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we have a big preference for program support, but that whichever program you're applying for funds needs to be aligned with one of our focus areas as we define it in the application, and we'll talk about it. So we'll go into the next slide, which details a little bit more eligibility. This is taken from our frequently asked questions. And so we just have a list of what is generally ineligible or not supported by the Research Foundation. And so this list hasn't changed this year. We haven't added anything new. So political parties, organizations that require or advocate for religious activity as part of or in exchange for services. And that is something that is kind of at the discretion of the foundation. We haven't run into that as a big issue, but it's come up a little bit where if it is a requirement or seems to be a requirement, then that would make an organization ineligible. We don't provide grants to individuals. We don't provide grants to international organizations because we do have that local geographic focus area. And then organizations that discriminate, we don't provide funds to. We don't provide grants to fundraising events or activities, travel or conference expenses, and single disease organizations. This came up a couple times during the last grant cycle. If you're focused on one issue and you're a local organization, then you're probably eligible. If you have questions about that, you can always ask. That kind of line item was more specific to these big national nonprofits that raise money for like one type of medical issue. And then we don't provide funds for medical research, and that gets real confusing because we're called the Research Foundation. So we just want to be really clear about that. And then organizations with net assets greater than 150 million, which we kind of already mentioned. And so, of course, funding decisions are at the discretion of the Research Foundation, and we always want to give that disclaimer, but we also, I think, do a pretty good job of just being really transparent so that organizations can make a really informed decision about whether it's worth their time to apply for a fund from the Research Foundation. We'll go into the next slide. So these are our two focus areas. They've been our two focus areas for the last couple years. Some of you may have remembered in year two when we had, well, year one and year two when we had a third focus area. But just like last year, we have the two focus areas. You only need to choose one. In fact, you can only choose one in the application. And so you'll want to see which one your program kind of most fits with as it's defined. So your program might fit both focus areas, but you only need to choose one. And then of the two focus areas, we do have a preference for programs that are expanding access to healthcare. And so there's some definitions that we'll go over on the next slide. We'll first talk about expanding access to care, and how we're defining that as a focus area. So I'm just going to read it for the sake of the recording and for all of us here. The Research Foundation prioritizes support for programs providing healthcare services. Programs in this focus area must directly address physical health, dental health, or behavioral health care to adults and/or children in need of no-cost or low-cost services. Qualified professionals provide these services to address healthcare needs. Program services should be evidence-based and available on a consistent basis, not limited to isolated events such as health fairs or resource fairs. And so the main definition for expanding access to care is providing healthcare services by a qualified licensed healthcare professional. And so we have some prompting questions to kind of help an applicant determine if this is the correct focus area for them. So does your program provide healthcare services? If yes, then it's probably expanding access to care. Are the healthcare services delivered by credentialed healthcare professionals? Are these healthcare services regularly available and easily accessible? Are they available to people who are uninsured or underinsured or have low income? then this would be probably the best focus area to apply for if you answer yes to those questions. And then promoting health equity is another focus area that we have. So we support programs which enhance community health by directly addressing barriers to healthcare and bridging service gaps. Organizations should articulate how their program improves the health of those they serve. Program services which promote health equity should include reliable, consistent practices to improve the health of those they serve. And so some questions to kind of get your mind going about if your program would meet the criteria for this focus area would be thinking about your program and which barriers are being eliminated so that people can access the healthcare that they need. How does participating in your program directly improve someone's health? How does your program navigate complex systems to ensure people receive the healthcare that they need? And so those are some questions that if you're able to easily answer those, then it's probably a great fit for promoting health equity. And if those questions feel like kind of a stretch or like, well, my program doesn't really relieve barriers to healthcare, so I'm not sure how it fits, then it's probably not a clear fit. So we just want to provide as much guidance with those questions as we can. And we have those questions on our application as well. So you'll notice that even though this isn't a new focus area for us, we're just more clearly defining it for our program in terms of addressing health. Because we observed last year an increase in applications overall. We got a lot. We got 81 applications, which is very exciting because it means organizations are getting more familiar with us and applying, but also it means that we're getting programs which, while they may be good and beneficial programs, are just a little too far removed from improving someone's health, which is our whole focus. And so we were observing that. And so we were like, we just need to kind of tighten up how we're defining promoting health equity, because we don't want to be misleading or confusing for applicants. We want it to be really clear. So we'll move into the next slide, which talks about what's not funded or what's not preferred. So examples of programs that the Research Foundation has funded for promoting health equity include preventative or early intervention programs, resource advocacy, case management programs, especially when they're related to improving health, supplies, health-related supplies that promote health and safety, and then transportation services to healthcare appointments or means of getting to healthcare appointments. Some examples of programs that we received applications on last year that we chose not to fund because of kind of what I mentioned just a moment ago, that they were just a little too far removed from how we're defining promoting health equity. We just want it to be really clear about how someone's health improves. Is food security programs. So food pantries, meal services, urban farming, job training programs, legal advocacy, financial literacy programs. If you have a program that's kind of more related to that, then we've chosen not to fund those before, largely because of several factors. One of which is that we have a 12-month grant period. And so you need to be able to show how somebody's health improves in 12 months. And a lot of the applications that we've seen for those programs were not able to show how someone's health improves in 12 months because of that program. It was very much like, well, this promotes health equity over time, because if somebody gets a job through our job training program, then they're more likely to get a full-time job. And if they get a full-time job, they're more likely to get healthcare benefits. And if they get healthcare benefits, they're more likely to get to healthcare appointments, and therefore their health will improve. And you can see how that's a little circuitous in terms of how they're going to measure how their job training program then gets somebody into healthcare appointments. So that's just one example, but that was a lot of the reason why we chose not to fund those programs, and just want to be really clear as we move into year 4 grant cycle that that those are examples of what we've chosen not to fund because it's just too far removed from how you would measure the impact in 12 months and how that's promoting health equity for somebody. And so I'll go ahead and talk about the award details. Ooh, and before we can stay on this slide, but I also want to share that that's listed on the app, like this information session is being recorded. And so you should be able to come back to it and check in and skip ahead about what you need to see. It's going to be posted on our website. But then also I have it listed in the application examples of programs that we've chosen to fund in addition to the definitions. And so when you go into the application, you should be able to see that there as well. So just some details about the awards. We have the same amount available that we awarded last year, 1.775 million. We were really grateful that the board continued to approve that. The award amounts range from $25,000 to $50,000 grants within the 12-month period. So it's for the calendar year of 2027. And then there's the question on the application of program support or general operating. And we have said this before, but we'll continue to share that we do have a strong preference for program support just because we're able to, it's very measurable when it's a program, and it's just what we've preferred to support. And then I want to make the distinction too that program awards can also have 10% of their award utilized toward indirect support or overhead costs. And so that can be helpful for those overhead needs. And then the requirements, should you receive an award, are that there's an expectation and there's a grant agreement that gets signed at the end of the year, but the expectation is that there will be a site visit, and it shouldn't take more than an hour for us to visit your organization and learn more and discuss the outcomes and kind of check in about how the program's going. And then there's also an interim report that's due mid-year, so it's due July 15th. So those of you who were awarded a grant this most recently, so in 2025 for the 2026 calendar year, I think I just sent out the interim report templates last week. And so you should be able to fill that out and get that in by July 15th. And then there's also the final report, which will be due for this grant cycle, January 2028, to share about the final outcomes for the 2027 calendar year. And then we'll move into the next slide. So we've made some changes to the application just to be a lot more clear, and also to make it, like we mentioned, we keep seeing an increase in applications. So it's also to make it easier for our review committee to review the applications. So we're having, previously we had one focus area that you would choose, and then you didn't have to explain why you chose that focus area. And so we do have questions in this year's application where you will choose one focus area which best matches your program, and then you will respond to some corresponding questions related to why did you choose this focus area. That's also helpful for you as an applicant, because you might determine that that really maybe one of your other programs is a better fit, just kind of as you're answering those questions. What we found when we were reviewing applications last year and the previous year was that there were many in which they would choose a focus area for a program, and then the responsibility was on the review committee to kind of determine, well, why did they choose this as a focus area, and how does their program relate to our definition. And so we want to kind of cut down on us having to speculate about that, and just organizations are the experts in their own programs and should be able to articulate why they chose a certain focus area. So there's going to be questions that relate to that. And then this is a question that's not new, but it continues to be important and continues to be something of a challenge for applicants, not all applicants, but many that we see, which is detailing the accessibility of your program's services. So there's one question in which we provide an example, but what we'd really like for you to do is walk us, the reader of the application, through how a person goes from not knowing about your program at all, but needing it, to being like at your site receiving the services that you're applying for, which you're applying for funds. And so how does somebody hear about the program? What are the steps that they need to do to get started with your program? What resources do they need to have? Are there certain actions that happen that create that either alleviate a barrier so that they're able to get into the program sooner, or are there certain barriers that are just what they are to get into the program? So like if your program has a wait list, that would be a great time to state that that impacts accessibility. If you have somebody who oversees that wait list and triages how people get into services, that would be a great time to list that in that accessibility question. So just walking us through, and you can create a character if you'd like and say like, Veronica's walking down the street and she qualifies for our services, and she sees about our services from a billboard, and then there's a phone number posted, and that phone number is a 24-hour line, and so she calls the 24-hour line. You kind of get the idea. But we would really like for you to walk us through how somebody gets into your program services, or what's the most common way. So from that, we also have, this is also something that's not new, but we've reformatted it to hopefully make it easier for applicants to follow through with, which is prompts to use the SMART format. The SMART acronym is having outcomes that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant or realistic, and time sensitive. And so previously we just asked that organizations list their goals in this format. And this year we've really broken it down to where it's going to make it, I think, easier for organizations to go ahead and make sure that their outcomes match this format. So you'll have to list how your goal is specific, how is it measurable, how is it achievable, just making it really clear. So that's also a prompt that we have this year. We also, something new that you'll see in the application, and I think I forgot to mention this during our in-person info session last week, is that we're requesting baseline numbers. And so if you have a program that's been operating for several years, and one of your outcomes is that there's going to be a 70%, or if one of the kind of inputs is that it's going to be 70% of an increase, we want to know what the baseline numbers are. So there's prompts to share how many more you would like what the number already is, so that we can determine how much is 70% more, for example. So that'll make it easier for us to determine impact, and also make a decision about investing in the program or not. So organizations last year, some applicants would include baselines and some applicants would not. And we observed that we were much more interested in getting all the information. And so baseline numbers were just so helpful that now in the application, you'll be prompted to enter them. And then I think that's, oh, yes, we also have important dates. So we have the application opening, which it opened last week. And then the deadline is going to be July 31st, same as last year. It takes us a while to review the applications. And it doesn't feel like very much time on our end, just being honest. Like it feels like a lot of information to get through and talk about and discuss and go through our whole process. And then we do a notification of awards December 11th. And we send the checks out in December. And so we don't operate on a reimbursement basis and we don't do like half checks where like you get the money, you get the award, you get the money, you get the award at like the beginning point, and then the other half at the halfway point after the interim report. You get the full award at the beginning. And that way you can utilize it. And then we just trust that you'll report on it throughout the calendar year in accordance with your grant agreement. And then site visits and interim reporting happen between April and July of the year that's funded. So we usually start site visits even as early, depending on the program, as early as like late March, but we usually give you a few months before you host us for an hour out for a site visit. Then the interim report, like I mentioned, is due July 15th, and then the final report will be due January 31st of 2028, which feels so far away. And also we're going to blink and it's going to be here, which is what it is. So those are some dates. We also are pretty good, I'll say, about sharing reminders. We have an excellent marketing person named Maggie who's just really on top of it and organized, and she sends out these emails for the community grants program, giving reminders about interim reports being due or a reminder about the final report being due. And so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise when that comes due. Okay, and we'll move into the next slide, which is going to be an overview of the application. We're going to go ahead and walk you through it. And I'm going to introduce, well, you already met her, Megan Hartwig Hayes, who does a great job of providing the technical assistance to help people get through the application, provide the overview. So I'll turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Kate. So you got the meat of the application, and now I get to walk you through the logistics. So my section, we're going to talk about where to find the application. We're going to review the application itself, provide tips for filling out the application, and then some tools that we recommend if you get in a tight spot or need to look at. So let's go ahead and start off with where to find the application. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the application is available on our website, and you all have been to our website because you've all registered for this webinar today, so thank you. But our website is the researchfoundationkc.org, and on our website, our main page, there'll be a pop-up that pops up to sign up for our, our newsletter or emails, and you can just exit out of that or sign up for information. And you scroll down, you'll see there's 3 different features on our website, and receive funding right here. You can click this and it'll take you to our website. If you want to learn more about what Cynthia and Kate were talking about with our different programs, you can click on what we do and then click on the community grants and then the community grants page. So on our community grants page, you'll see right here, this is very exciting, the apply here button's right here on the top. You don't even have to scroll, it's above the fold. So you can click this button, it'll take you directly to the application here. And then as we scroll down on the page, there's lots of useful information on this website, including who received awards last year. So as Kate was talking about what we're funding and what we're not funding, there's a little bit of information you can look at who we granted last year, but also it takes you through the application process, eligibility requirements, and frequently asked questions. So this is just a great tool to use as you're filling out the applications, as you're coming up with questions. If you want a quick way to look at the eligibility requirements. And then also down here at the bottom of the page, there's frequently asked questions and then our important dates again. So if you run into any issues or are like, I think I have a question about this, go ahead and click on the frequently asked questions. It's a great little bump out that gives some questions answer some questions about the application, how to go about it, and just different questions that we get multiple times throughout the year. So we've created that document. And then also Kate's information here. You can email or you can call her. So if you need any help. So we're going to go ahead and you can click this link and it'll take you directly to this page. Now we are using Grant Interface as our community grants portal, and it's hosted by Founded. And you can log in directly to the Research Foundation's Grant Interface page, or if you have a Grant Interface, just regular login, you can do that as well. So you're going to type in your information here, or if you need to create a new account. So if you've never applied for one of our grants or any other grants that use this interface, you can click create a new account. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You just kind of walk through the step-by-step process. And it has actually several different sections. It gives you organization information, user information, executive offers, and so on. Make sure you fill out all the questions that have asterisks next to it. And once you complete your application, you'll get an email and a link to log in. Now, for instance, if someone in previous years used the login for your application from last year, and that person is no longer with us, with your organization. So what you'll do is reach out to Kate or myself, someone in the office. Our team can help you kind of reset your password for that account. And so if you have the email address and you just don't have the password, you can go ahead and do forgot password. But if you don't have the email address or the password, but you know you have a login, you can reach out to Kate or call our office, and our team is happy to help you get that taken care of. So we're going to go ahead and log in. On the application, the kind of dashboard of the application, you'll see grants. This is the current grant application that's open. And then you can also look at historical grant applications. So you can see 2025, 2024, and 2023 applications. So the nice thing about it is you can go back to an old application and click on it. So let's click on 2024, and you can look and see, you can actually like go into that application and print a PDF of the application. You can look who worked on it, what documents you uploaded, and the contact information available. Now we're going to go ahead and click on that little house, and that'll take you back to the dashboard. This little guy, our logo right here, will take you directly to the Research Foundation's website. So if you want to look up something on our website quickly, you can click this little guy. It's a short hyperlink for us. Now we're going to go ahead and apply. So we're going to click this apply button, and you can see the information's right here. And it gives you the application process and everything. It details everything that Kate kind of talked about. We're trying to be very transparent with all the information, and it's listed multiple times. So you can click this apply button, and you can see, oh, wait, you already have an application open. Would you like to go ahead and view your request or open up a new application? So this is something to think about if you have multiple people working on it. So we're going to go ahead and open up the application, and there are several different sections that we have of the application. There is the community grant details, the grant contact information, organization, program, attachments, and certification. So on this home page, you see those different sections. You also see the contact information for the grant. So if you need to update that, if that person's changed or has left, you can go ahead and edit that information using that little pencil. You can look at where your request is at. So if you've drafted it and last time someone was in it. And then here is the application packet. So that is going to be whatever is in your application that has been completed in your application. So if you complete the application, submit it, this button is where you'll print a PDF of what you submitted. Or if it's still in draft, you've saved a copy, you can click that and print it off and edit it that way. Or this question list is also a great tool. You can use the question list, and that is actually just a blank copy of all the questions. That is actually the handout that you all receive in the chat and will be emailed out. So as we walk through the grant application, The community grant details are pretty self-explanatory, but something to keep in mind, you must complete the application online. You can't save it as a Word document and email it to Kate or someone in our office. It must be completed through the grant interface portal. And then a grant contact information, please make sure the grant contact name and phone number is the person that can actually answer questions about the grant. Some teams have grant writers on staff or have contracted that out, and they put that grant writer's name there, but they don't know anything about the program. So it's very important that you put the grant contact name that can answer questions, that can sign the grant agreement, that can fill out interim reports if grants are awarded. So this is something that we really want to make sure this information is correct. Now you go down to the organization information. This is just basic information about your organization, mission statement. Something to keep in mind, you'll see there's lots of text boxes and some have character limits and some do not. So grant interface sees character limits as every space, every emoji, anything you want to put, any punctuation, it counts down. So as you can see, it counts down for you, but just keep that in mind when you are writing in your responses. So we've given you several different sections that have larger amounts of characters. Now, if you need some help in simplifying your wording, a tool that you could use is an AI. You can type in your organization history, and it's 1,775 characters. And you can paste it in AI, and please reduce this down to 1,500. Now, please keep in mind, AI is not grant writers. It's pretty easy right now to spot when AI has written something. So please make sure that you're not using it as your grant writer, but just using it as a tool to help you fine tune your wording and make your answers more clear and efficient, so that way our organization and our committees can take that information and utilize it. So proofing and making sure that you're using it as a tool and not a crutch. Now we're going to get down to the program information. So this is where you're going to select your priority alignment, as Kate was talking about. And there's several different questions. So if you clicked expanding access to care, you're going to click this. Or if you select promoting health equity, you're going to click an A. So if you have any questions with that, please let me know. Now we're going to go ahead and go down here. A lot of these examples are pretty self-explanatory. This is where Kate was talking about your SMART goals and an example. Now we're going to get down to attachments. In the attachment section, you have a limited amount of space in order to attach files. So please keep that in mind, and you can only upload one file per attachment. So if you, for example, let's go down to your financials. You have two different financial statements that need to be provided, position and activities. So you might just print them both up and then scan them together as one file. Another thing to keep in mind is that there's a limited number of space between all the different uploads. So for instance, if you have a larger file and you get a warning, hey, this file's too large, one tool that I use is called Adobe Acrobat. They have a free PDF converter. So if you just like search PDF compressor, it literally is the first one that shows up. I use it all the time with compressing PDFs, because it actually, when you upload a file, you get to select whether it is a large compression, a medium compression, or a small, and gives you the sizes. And it's very easy. You can select the file, upload it, and then download it to your documents, and then upload it here. So this is a great tool. Now, for instance, if your organization is not big enough to file IRS 990, please submit the short form that shows that you don't have to submit one, or information that could be found on the 990 in a Word document that you've saved as a PDF. Now, then the certification is just certifying that all this information is true. And then you can save your application, and you can come back to it at any time. So you can save as many times as you want. But when you're ready to submit, you can click the submit button, and make sure you click the submit button before the deadline. It kind of gives you this right here as a reminder. Now, for instance, if you get through, you start filling out the questions and start really getting into the depth of the application and realize this is just not for me, go ahead and abandon the request. This is helpful for our team, knowing that you are not going to submit. You're just abandoning your request and it's just going to hang out there. Or if your cat walks across your keyboard as you're working through it and it's just too much to salvage, you can abandon your request and always start a new application. So these are things to think about. And that are some tools. So I am going to go ahead and stop my screen share. We're going to go ahead and turn it back over to Kate for some questions.
Yes. So I was seeing if there's questions in the chat, but actually this is better. If folks have questions, you can always raise your hand and we can see what question, or like we can play the game of who raised their hand first so we can get questions answered. I will preface the question asking, which is that we want to hear your questions, but also if you have a question that you know is like hyper specific to your own program, something very nuanced, please reach out to me so that we can have a discussion about it and we don't use up all of our question time kind of talking about, you know, something very specific to your own program. And I don't see any hands raised, but I wonder if that's just because I can't see that.
Kate, I know in our last session, while people are typing in questions, someone asked a question about if I applied last year, can I apply again this year, or is there any
Yes.
special treatment?
Yes, if you applied last year, you can definitely apply again this year. If you applied last year and were not awarded funds, and you are just going to go ahead and submit the exact same application, and we haven't talked about why we chose not to award it last year, please call me and ask why you weren't awarded funds last year so we can talk about that and assess whether it makes sense to reapply this year or whether there's another program that might be a better fit.
Right.
I know another question that came up during the info session on Thursday was also if you have two programs that fit, do you have two different applications? And the answer is no. We would just have one application per organization. And so if you have two programs that you're like, oh gosh, both of these really fit, you could either make a choice about which one you think is the better fit and apply focused on that program. Or what some organizations have done is they call their project name for their grant kind of encompasses two different programs that their organization has. And the grant would of course be for like the project as a whole, which would include both programs. And so that's an option too. But that's also something where if you're kind of not sure which one, you could call me and I could share some feedback about which one fits the focus area better.
Great, Kate. We have a question from Catherine on Encore. Do you review drafts or short summaries? And if so, is there a deadline for this?
Yeah, oh, that's a great, I haven't gotten that one before. No, we don't review drafts or short summaries, but that would be an instance where if you didn't want to go through the whole application, but you were like, well, here's my program, does this fit with your focus area? You could reach out to me and we could talk about it. And so that would be kind of similar to me reviewing a summary of your program. It would just be a discussion, but I have had organizations reach out in the past and say, well, I'm about to hit submit, but can you look over my application first? And we don't do that. So we won't go over the application as like a draft format. We'll go ahead and just talk about what are their concerns that they have with it, because there's usually a couple of concerns before they go ahead and hit submit. I guess I have gone in and looked to make sure that every question was answered at somebody's request. But for the most part, we've been just very busy with the ones that get submitted. And so going in and looking at the draft ones has not been super feasible. So if you have questions about one, do reach out, but I don't go in and look at the drafts for the applications.
All right, we have another question. Is there a specific language that you all want to see on an application? Like we should use participants or clients?
Yeah, so no, it's whatever you call your service population in your organization. You'd want your application to reflect that. And if it is something that you know is a little different than how we usually refer to service populations and social services, just clarify that in your program description, that like, oh, we refer to our clients as students, or something like that. And so when you start talking, even though we're not a school, and so when you start talking about students, even though you're not a school, that will make sense to us, because we'll be like, oh, they're referring to their students as clients. That would be an example of that. But we don't have a language that we're specific to, so long as nothing betrays discrimination, which would of course make an applicant ineligible. But that hasn't been an issue so far, thank goodness. And then I see another question. Kate, would you prefer contact by email for really specific questions? Either one's fine. Yes, I respond quicker to email, but you can also call me. And if it's a question that you anticipate is going to involve some discussion, like it's not like a yes or no question, then it might be a better idea to email me so we can set up a time so I can call you and we can spend like a half hour discussing it together, and I can put that on my calendar. That's worked out really well in the past. These are great questions. Are there any other questions that come up?
I don't see any more in the chat right now.
Okay. Does anyone feel so moved as to unmute and ask a question? Okay, great. Well, if you think of a question later and you're like, oh, didn't ask this, or if you get to the application and that prompts the question, do reach out, send an email so we can set up a time to meet, or give me a phone call, and we can discuss it. We appreciate you all attending today. Thank you so much.
Hey, Kate, we do have one question.
We had one come through.
There was one final question. I was just going to wrap things up, and it asked about the recording, and Maggie will send that out. If you did register, we have your contact information, and that will go back out to you. And I certainly just want to wrap up by saying thank you to everyone. Thank you to our team for their work today, but thank you to all of you for taking time to learn a little bit more about our process, our application. And if you have any specific questions, reach back out to Kate.